Welcome to Monograph Matters. I'm talking today with Jamie Carroll, David Yeager, and Robert Crosnoe, authors of the SRCD Monograph on Mindset by Context, Schools, Classrooms, and Unequal Translation of Expectations into Math Achievement. This discussion focuses on the findings that boys from low SES families were the most vulnerable group. So in this monograph, you found that boys from low SES families and men of color were the most vulnerable group. Could you please tell us more about the findings?
Yes, so a big part of this monograph was trying to dive into the courses that students take in high school, including where they start in ninth grade and then where they end up in 10th grade. And this is a really essential step in the progress through the high school curriculum because students who aren't making that first step from one math level to the next advanced math level aren't going to be able to have enough time in high school to graduate with the advanced courses you need to go to college. And so this is a very critical step in determining whether students are actually going to progress enough in high school to lead them in a college preparatory pathway. And we found that students who did not progress, who were not on track between 9th and 10th grade, were less likely to graduate from high school. They're less likely to go to college later on. They're less likely to take advanced courses later on in high school. And so this is a really critical period for students to make progress through that math curriculum. And so when we dove into these patterns of inequality, we did find differences in the level of coursework that students were in ninth grade, as well as whether they were advancing to the next level. And we found that it was boys from low SES families who experienced the lowest levels. They started out in the lowest level of math in ninth grade and also were less likely to make progress moving forward from ninth to 10th grade. And we found a similar pattern for students of color as well. So this is something that was critical in trying to understand, given these students are already starting in this disadvantaged position in ninth grade, are they making progress, and what kinds of students are able to make progress? Who is well positioned to be able to make progress, even though they're from this disadvantaged group of low SES boys? And we found that expectations for success in ninth grade, so the idea that I'm going to be successful and I expect to be successful in my math in high school, was a large predictor of whether or not students were going to progress in math, but more so for boys from low SES families. So for these boys without high expectations, without starting high school with the ideas that I'm going to be successful in high school math, they were less likely to progress in 10th grade, leading them down a pathway to not being as successful in their math coursework in high school and beyond. So looking deeper into these results and trying to understand, okay, well, these low SES boys, their expectations were the most important for pushing them forward. Expectations were important for everyone, but less so for the other groups of students. How does the context affect that? How does the context moderate this relationship between students' expectations and their progress through math in high school? And we found that it is in contexts that were already supportive, contexts where most students were high achieving, and also contexts where their peers had higher expectations, higher growth mindset beliefs, or the belief that you are going to be able to change your intelligence level. It's malleable, it's not fixed. These types of environments are where students' expectations aren't as important. Students don't need to have that drive, that agency in order to progress in math between 9th and 10th grade in high school. Whereas in this environments where the school is on average lower achieving school, and there's fewer students that believe that working hard will help them progress in school, those students who have expectations can really thrive. But without high expectations, they're not going to do as well. And again, this was critically important for the boys from low SES families. I'm going to let David elaborate on some of the results about stereotypes.
So we looked at the school level moderators, and it's a complex story, but one that we think makes sense in light of the models. But there was a new hypothesis that we were able to test, and that was around student perceptions of stereotyping in the classroom. So a lot of times we've studied supportive contexts that were assets for students, like the peer norms that helped them or the school achievement. But we hadn't really studied things that might be toxic and especially harmful. But in the national study, we had students rate the culture and climate in each math classroom. And for a subset of students, we were able to link through administrative records the students nested within teachers. And then we could compute the average feelings of stereotyping for each group in each setting. And what we found was really interesting. So first of all, stereotyping seemed to be harmful. If it's a correlational study, but from if we made a causal interpretation, seemed harmful that in general, classrooms where more students say they felt negatively stereotyped on the basis of their, in this case, it was gender identity, then students did worse. They made less progress to math the next year. That was true across the board for every gender by socioeconomic status subgroup. But what became interesting is that stereotyping was especially harmful for students who had low expectations at the beginning of the school year, and if they were from groups, either girls from any socioeconomic status group or boys from a low SES group. So again, boys, low SES boys who had low expectations and felt stereotyped did the worst in terms of the progress of any group in the whole sample. Interestingly, boys from high SES groups didn't show an interaction with their expectations. So regardless of their expectations, stereotyping seemed to be negative, but there wasn't an extra harmful effect. And so there's something we're still figuring out how to make sense of, but one could speculate that there are many positive stereotypes already for high SES boys in advanced math, and that even if they're not terribly confident, then they still might benefit from those stereotypes and might not be especially harmed. So interesting set of new hypotheses that we hope to follow up on, and we hope that will be generative for future laboratory research and perhaps intervention research that could test reasons why we see these effects.
Right. So to just kind of sum up over all the findings that we found and how it relates to this mindset by context theory, is we truly found that it was the group that was the most vulnerable at the start, the low SES boys who had the lowest progress in math, whose expectations were really the most important. And that was the most true in environments at the school and teacher level that were less supportive. So they needed this agency, these expectations to help drive them forward in contexts that weren't already optimally achieving, where their peers weren't helping to kind of push them forward with high levels of motivation and effort, and where maybe their teachers were making assumptions about their abilities and beliefs based on their gender background. And so, as David mentioned, these are just some findings that we have, some initial hypotheses about why this is going on, but we think that this can spark a lot more research moving forward in how gendered pathways and inequality in these pathways within schools can be affected by the environment students are in, as well as their own expectations and beliefs.
Read more about this topic in the monograph issue, Mindset by Context, Schools, Classrooms, and the Unequal Translation of Expectations into Math Achievement by Carroll, Yeager, Temple et al. If you like this video, consider watching our Monograph Matters playlist. For additional resources related to these and other issues of the monographs of the Society for Research in Child Development, please visit monographmatters.srcd.org.